You stand in Topkapi, 1520. The corridors hum, the lamps smoke. Within this palace, courtiers whisper about dynastic heirs and the most powerful women of the Ottoman Empire. The old sultan has died. The guards seal the doors. A single mistake tonight can end lives. Cloth rustles in the dark passage. A hand presses your shoulder and pushes you back from a guarded screen. The women pass. You smell a tar and lamp oil. You hear the soft clink of keys. A eunuch's voice orders silence. You do not belong here, but you stay. One voice commands the rest. Power moves behind closed doors. You cannot see her face. You hear her title, Valide, mother of the Sultan. The word moves like a blade. The new ruler, Suleiman, is not yet crowned. Yet the household obeys his mother. She says which servants stay. She names which ones leave. She decides which rival clerks keep their ledgers. She chooses who carries the seal to the treasury. The chief black eunuch bows. The steward writes. You feel the air change as orders flow. Watch who signs the orders. A priest's canon law has no force here. Here stand different laws, custom, decrees, precedent. The palace runs on them. Tonight the empire shifts, not by swords in the square, by a woman's voice in a quiet hall. You try to read the faces. They give nothing. The guards escort the scribes away. You hear only sandals on marble. Then the great door closes. Who set this rule in the first place? The Queen Mother was Hafsa Sultan. She came from the Crimean Khanate and entered the Ottoman dynasty by marriage to Selim. When her son Suleiman reached the throne in September 1520, her status rose at once. The household called her Valide Sultan. The title had grown across the late 15th and early 16th centuries, but Hafsa made it visible. She coordinated the inner palace. She funded mosques and schools in Manisa and then in the capital. She set patterns of patronage. She matched trusted women with rising officers. She kept the prince's household stable during his governorship and the transition to power. Her quarters stood near the Harem heart. Yet her influence touched the chancery, the mint, the kitchens, and the ceremonial court. The harem is a political engine. Ottoman law and practice gave the reigning mother unique access. She could see the sultan without notice. She could send orders across the women's apartments and through the eunuch hierarchy. She held revenues from endowed estates. She received gifts from provincial governors who sought favor. She had the right to speak at critical moments, when appointments shifted, when a prince moved, when a grand vizier fell. Hafsa used these levers with care. She understood the danger of overreach in a young reign. She made allies in the religious class and among the palace administrators. Her foundations announced dignity without open challenge. Her diplomacy reduced friction among rival households that had grown under Selim's harsh rule. One mother's caution would not last forever. Foreshadowing grew within the palace. A new favorite entered Suleiman's life, Hürrem, later known as Roxelana. She did not become Valide. She became Haseki Sultan, chief consort, with an influence few consorts had shown. Her rise signaled change. The power of the Queen Mother would soon share space with a strong consort and the princess network. Hafsa saw this and managed the balance while she lived. She arranged ceremonies. She guided the birth household for royal children. She maintained lines with the Crimean court and the ulama in the capital. Yet the court already shifted around her. New buildings rose, new salaries flowed, new expectations formed about who could speak for the ruler. A clock had started in the women's wing. 3 months later, rumors spread that the Valide prepared a public act of mercy to calm a tense city. Grain prices stood high. The janissaries muttered. The treasury clamped down on waste. The Valide planned an appearance at a mosque she had endowed, with alms for the poor and a pardon for minor offenders. The gesture would show stability. It would also mark her supremacy within the household. She would appear veiled but commanding, escorted by eunuchs and trusted aegis. The plan moved quickly. Courtiers watched for any misstep. But a letter arrived that same night, sealed in green. The messenger came through a side gate used by foreign envoys. Whose hand sent that letter, and what price did it demand? The messenger knelt in the side court before dawn. The chief black eunuch took the packet and crossed the inner gate. Hafsa Sultan waited inside her apartments. Lamps burned low. Paper rustled. The seal showed a tamga from the step. She broke the wax. She read alone first, then again with her steward. The lines were clear. The Crimean Khan sought confirmation of stipends and safe conduct for his envoys. He also asked for the release of a Tatar notable taken in a border raid during Selim's last year, the request tied to her own kin ties, the timing cut into her planned public pardon. The letter names its sender at last. She weighed the factions. The Janissaries had seized the captive and wanted credit for firm rule. The divan scribes wanted a clean ledger before the feast day. The city needed calm. The Khan expected warmth from a mother he counted as his ally. Hafsa sent for the chief black eunuch, the Harem Kathuda, and the Kira who handled purchases. She ordered gifts prepared, cloth, silver, and a signed assurance that the new ruler valued the old alliance. She kept the pardon question open. She would decide it after she heard the vizier's view. One act of mercy will cost her dearly. Ibrahim, the favorite in the royal household, came at sunrise. He had not yet reached the Grand Vizierate. He already handled delicate matters for Suleiman. He bowed and listened as Hafsa put the facts in order: grain prices, guard temper, the mosque appearance, the Crimean request. He offered procedure. The Sultan could fold the release into a general amnesty to save face for the corps. Hafsa measured him. He spoke as a loyal servant. He also watched the balance between the mother's will and the ruler's order. A favorite rises while rivals count steps. Hafsa moved from counsel to action. She sent a eunuch to the Agus of the Janissaries with food stipends for the day and a formal thanks for their vigilance. She drafted a note for the imperial chancery to prepare a narrow pardon. Small crimes only. No thieves who had harmed citizens. Then she added a sentence that left space for one named addition by the Sultan. She would place the Crimean captive there if the morning unfolded well. She directed the Kira to distribute alms in her name at the mosque courtyard. She told the Kethuda to tighten access to the women's wing for 2 days to quiet gossip. The Janissaries watched for weakness in silence. Custom and law framed her reach. The Ottoman order blended Sharia and Qanun. The Sultan issued Qanun names. The mother did not legislate. She influenced. She placed. She endowed. Her Vakaf incomes gave her independence to spend without burdening the treasury. She used that leverage. She linked clerics to her mosque school. She placed trusted women with the princesses. She asked for lists of vacancies before public announcements. She marked marriages between palace women and promising officers. Each act built a network loyal to her son's stability and to her office. Her next order will bind 2 factions. Mid-morning, Ibrahim returned from the Sultan. Suleiman approved the public act. He liked the phrasing of a narrow pardon with a single named case added at the mother's request. He would announce it after the noon prayer. Hafsa nodded. She asked about the women. Ibrahim hesitated. The new favorite, Hürrem, had taken charge of a small clothing distribution in the inner court without asking. Hafsa showed no reaction. She told the Kethuda to thank Hürrem for zeal and to remind all consorts that public charity flowed through the Valide's hand. A small gesture reveals a growing edge. Hafsa closed the chamber. She took up the Crimean letter once more. She held the city's calm in one palm and the frontier alliance in the other. She called for clean veils and the keys to her coach. She told the steward to carry the gifts. She told the eunuch to bring the pardon text. Then she added a quiet instruction that not even Ibrahim heard. Include one more name. Seal it now. Whose name did she add to the royal pardon? And who would defy it at the mosque gate? By noon, the palace stirred to the street. Hafsa Sultan left her apartments veiled and steady. The chief black eunuch led. Ibrahim rode ahead with a narrow escort. The pardon text lay in a lacquer case. The city watched the route to her endowed mosque. Market stalls thinned. Judges and scribes gathered near the gate. Women with children waited at the courtyard wall. The muezzin cleared his throat. The Janissary Aga stood by the entrance with a closed face. The courtyard holds its breath. Hafsa entered the outer court. She paused so the poor could see her. She ordered alms handed out in measured bundles. She called the judge to her side to witness the signatures. She told Ibrahim to open the case. He did so. The Sultan's seal shone at the bottom. The judge read the phrases: minor thieves, petty debts, street brawls without injury, one named addition by the Sultan at the mother's request. The name sat there in crisp ink. The Tatar notable from the frontier raid. One name carries 3 different risks. The Janissary Aga stepped forward. He bowed. He asked to speak as guardian of order. Hafsa inclined her head. He kept his voice low. The Corps had taken the Tatar with blood and risk on the steppe. A public release here would shame the barracks. The city would read it as weakness. He asked that the captive remain in the fortress until the Sultan himself spoke. Ibrahim answered that the Sultan had spoken through the sealed text. Silence can cut as hard as a command. Hafsa did not raise her voice. She asked the judge to state the law. The judge said the Sultan could pardon at pleasure at accession. He said a named case within a general amnesty carried no stain to the guardians. Hafsa then offered a path. The captive would be released into the custody of the Valide's steward at sunset. He would leave the city at once under escort to the Crimean embassy. The Janissaries would walk with the coach to show joint honor. The Aga weighed the words. He nodded. He asked for written record that the Corps had guarded the passage. A compromise saves pride and policy. The crier read the pardon to the crowd. Cheers rose. The alms baskets emptied. The women in the forecourt blessed the Valide's name. Ibrahim signaled the scribes to note the Janissary's role. Hafsa sent a private word to the embassy about the sunset transfer. She told her steward to prepare a quiet gate and to pay the fortress clerks their fees from her vakaf income, not the treasury. The moment settled. The city relaxed. The Aga ordered his men to clear a path for the coach. Goodwill buys an afternoon, not a year. Hafsa returned to the palace by a side route. She stopped at the women's market room. She asked the Kithuda for accounts of the clothing distribution. Hürrem's name stood in bold on several notes of thanks. The Valide read them without comment. She told the Kithuda to bring Hürrem at dusk for tea and an audit of planned charities. She sent an extra basket of cloth to Hürrem's rooms with a polite line, "For tomorrow's needs," through the Valide's hand. The message was mild. The boundary was firm. Small courtesies mapped the field. Late afternoon, the Crimean embassy sent a second packet. The Khan thanked the court for the favor. He also asked for confirmation that the captive would carry letters to his own family, proving honorable treatment. Hafsa approved. She directed the chief black eunuch to assign 2 senior guards for the transfer. She told Ibrahim to walk the first stretch himself. He raised an eyebrow. She held his gaze. He agreed. She wanted no rumor that money changed hands at the city gate. She protects the seal as much as the man. Dusk drew in. Hürrem entered the tea room as ordered. She bowed deep. Hafsa asked about the clothing gifts. Hürrem praised the Valide's example. She asked to add a small fund for widows from her own stipend. Hafsa approved and placed the fund under her mosque's registrar. Hürrem accepted the ledger. She smiled. She did not look away. The Valide met the smile and closed the book. 2 patrons cannot share one purse. A runner burst into the antechamber. He knelt. The sunset transfer had reached the outer gate. A crowd gathered. A paper had appeared with a counter order. It carried a private seal, a tulip within a circle. The fortress refused to hand over the captive until the seal was confirmed. Who owns the tulip seal, and why challenge the Valide at night? Night pressed on the outer court. Torches guttered. Hafsa Sultan rose from the tea table and walked fast. Ibrahim matched her stride. The chief black eunuch led with 2 guards. The runner kept to their heels. They reached the fortress gate where the captive waited for transfer. A clerk held a folded paper. The seal showed a tulip within a circle. Night favors bold orders. Hafsa asked whose seal it was. The clerk said it came from the Boston Shabash's office. The head gardener controlled this gate and the water stairs. He used a flower on his private seal. The clerk added a line. The order had been carried by a steward from a princess's house. It told the fortress to hold the captive for questioning before any release. A steward risks much with one sentence. Hafsa asked for the steward's name. The clerk whispered it. He belonged to Hatice Sultan's household. Ibrahim's face stayed still. The chief black eunuch signaled his men to find the steward and bring him to the gate. Hafsa told the judge to read the accession law aloud. The judge stated it clearly. A general pardon once proclaimed could not be narrowed at the gate by a lesser seal. A named case once included could not be delayed unless the Sultan himself revoked it. Procedure cuts through fog. The Bostan Sabasha arrived with his escort. He bowed to the ground. He said a princess's steward had borrowed his seal for a fast note. He had not read the text. He now saw the danger. He offered the seal for inspection. Ibrahim looked to Hafsa. She nodded to the judge. The judge pressed the wax and read the margin marks. The tulip was real. The margin hand was not the gardener's. Someone wrote in another hand. The steward from Hatice's house reached the gate under guard. He fell to his knees. He said Hatice had ordered brief questions to protect the palace. Rumors said the captive carried a list of smugglers who paid bribes to a market officer close to her estates. She did not wish to shame the Valide. She wished to keep the names from the crowd and pass them through proper hands. She had acted in haste. One good cause can still break order. Hafsa kept her voice level. She said the pardon stood. She said the captive would pass to the Crimean embassy at once under joint escort. She said any list would be taken by sealed packet and reviewed tomorrow at the palace under the judge's eye. She ordered the steward to return to Hatice with that message. She told the Bostan Shabasha to record the misuse of his seal and to lock it in his chest until morning. Boundaries hold the palace together. Ibrahim stepped close. He asked, low, whether to soften the note to Hatice. Hafsa said no. She said a princess could not counter an accession grace. She then turned to the judge and revealed the quiet line she had added before noon. The pardon contained a clause naming Ibrahim as the Sultan's agent for the transfer and for any dispute at the gate. She had placed it there to bind factions to a single witness. The quiet clause was the test. The Janissary Aga approached. He had come on foot from the mosque. He heard the judge's reading. He signaled his men to form a lane. The captive, guarded, walked from the fortress to the embassy coach. The joint escort moved off toward the water stairs. The crowd parted. No coin changed hands. No extra paper passed. Ibrahim watched until the coach turned the corner. A promise made in daylight survived the night. The gate cleared. Hafsa dismissed the judge and thanked the Bostan Shabasha. She kept Ibrahim and the chief black eunuch back. She asked Ibrahim why Hatice's steward would borrow a seal he did not own. Ibrahim answered with care. The steward feared that the Valide's mercy would erase proof of bribery tied to a princess's officer. He wanted to secure the list first. Hafsa nodded. She said the officer's name would come to her by dawn. A list can unseat more than one man. Back in the women's wing, a page waited with a fresh note. It carried Hatice's hand. She apologized for the seal. She asked to speak at sunrise. She hinted at names that touched the kitchens, the gardens, and the market grain. Hafsa set the note aside. She told the chief black eunuch to place discreet watchers at the Bostan Sabasha's office and at the princess's door. The palace sleeps, but the ledgers do not. Hürrem stood in the corridor as Hafsa returned. She had not slept. She bowed and offered a small tray of sweetened milk. She congratulated the Valide on a calm night. She added one line. A woman in the fortress kitchen had seen the steward meet a chancery scribe before dusk. She could name him. Hafsa looked at Ibrahim. He said nothing. The circle around the tulip was not the gardener's alone. Who paid the chancery scribe? And how far did the list reach? Before sunrise, the watchers reported in. The Bostan Sabasha kept his seal locked. The steward from Hatice's house sat under guard. The chancery scribe waited in chains. Hafsa Sultan entered the small council room by the Harem gate. Lamps hissed. Fresh ink stung the nose. The judge arranged papers. Ibrahim stood to one side. Hadich arrived, veiled and pale. Hürrem came at the Valide's summons and kept to the rear. The room holds its breath. Hafsa opened with the law. Accession mercy stood. Misuse of a private seal would be recorded. Then she called the scribe. He knelt. His wrists shook. She asked who had paid him to carry the tulip order and to stall the transfer. He tried to hedge. The judge read his note from the fortress clerk. Ibrahim set the wax impression beside it. The man's face broke. He named the payer, the market officer who controlled grain scales near Hadis's estates. He had feared the captives' list would destroy his post. He had promised coin and promotion to the scribe. One name lands like a hammer. Hafsa asked Hatis whether she had known of the offer. Hatis said no. Her steward had heard rumors of bribes and begged to seize the list first, to spare her household a scandal in the street. She took blame for haste. She asked mercy for the steward. Hafsa kept her eyes on the table. She turned to the Boston Shabasha. He confirmed that the seal had been lent for a moment at the steward's request, without reading the text. He apologized for lax care. A princess bows, but the seal still bleeds weight. Hafsa questioned the steward next. He admitted the loan. He denied any coin. He named 2 market weighers who paid the officer to undercount. He insisted he acted to shield the palace from a dirty quarrel at the gate. Hafsa listened. She asked the judge whether an officer's bribe at the grain scales touched public order. He said yes. Grain fraud broke the peace faster than any rumor. Grain is the city's nerve. Hürrem stepped forward when called. She repeated her line from the night. A kitchen woman had seen the scribe meet the officer near the fortress. She gave the scribe's name. It matched the man now in chains. Hafsa thanked her and ordered the woman rewarded from her vakuf. Hürrem bowed and withdrew. Hatish watched every move and said nothing. Ibrahim waited for the Valide to draw the line. Rivalries pause when the law speaks. Hafsa gave the sentences. The scribe would lose his post and face the judge's court. The market officer would be seized at once by the Bostan Sabash's men and lodged in the fortress. The steward of Hatish's house would be removed and assigned to a distant estate for 2 years. He would not enter palace gates during that time. The Bostan Sabasha would keep his seal under double key. Ibrahim would audit the grain scales that week with the judge's clerk. Orders fall like stones in a pond. Hadich raised her veil. She thanked the Valide for sparing her household a public stain. She asked for the right to appoint a new steward, subject to the Valide's approval. Hafsa agreed and named 2 women of her own to oversee the change. Hatish bowed again. She did not look at Hürrem. Hürrem kept her eyes low and smiled only once, quickly, when Hafsa mentioned the audit. Allies today may be rivals tomorrow. The Janissary Aga entered at a nod. He heard the orders. He promised a quiet city and firm guards at the scales. He also asked one question. Would the palace announce the sentences publicly to reassure the barracks and the market? Hafsa weighed the risks. A public notice would calm the streets. It would also show a princess's steward under censure, which could invite whispers. Public calm or private dignity. Choose one. Hafsa rose. She said the court would post a narrow notice at noon. A scribe punished, a market officer removed, the scales under audit. No names of princess or steward. The Aga accepted. The judge gathered the papers. The Bostan Sabasha reached for his seal box and stopped when the chief black eunuch raised a hand. Double key began that instant. Ibrahim wrote the audit order and sanded the ink. The verdict binds the palace for now. Hafsa dismissed the room. She asked Hatis to remain. She asked Hürrem to remain as well. The Janissary Aga paused at the door and glanced back. He read the air and left. The chamber fell still. Hafsa told Hatish that her household must move with care. She told Hürrem that all charity lines would run through the Valide's registrar, without exception. She then looked at Ibrahim and said, "Clear. that the grain audit must produce a clean list by Friday. Deadlines keep courtiers honest. A page slipped in, breathless. He knelt and held up a small tray. A fresh note had arrived for the Valide. The seal was green, the step tamga again. The Crimean embassy thanked the court for the night transfer. The captive had delivered a second packet to their envoy. The envoy now requested an immediate audience, claiming the list held one more name that concerned the palace kitchens directly. What name sits in that second packet? And who will fall if it is spoken aloud? The embassy coach waited at the Harem gate. The envoy bowed. He held the second packet. Hafsa Sultan took it. The judge broke the cord. The paper named a pantry clerk from the palace kitchens. It tied him to the market officer already in chains. It listed payments for flour weight and oil measures. It showed dates and witnesses. Hafsa read it twice. She passed it to Ibrahim. He scanned the lines and looked up. The kitchens feed the throne. Hafsa called the chief black eunuch. She ordered a quiet arrest inside the kitchens. No noise, no rumor to the barracks. The eunuch nodded and left. She told the judge to collect the clerk's ledgers and seal the pantry storerooms. She told Ibrahim to add the kitchens to the grain audit. Hatice stood silent. Hürrem watched the envoy and the paper. A name can break a year. Back to the kitchens. The arrest took minutes. The clerk folded without struggle. The guards sealed his chest and took his keys. The comptroller listed sacks and jars. The oven fires stayed lit. The breakfast trays left on time. The court woke, unaware. The palace heard only later that a change had come. Order holds when meals do not stop. Hafsa returned to the council room. She thanked the envoy. She promised a full answer to the Khan by week's end. She dismissed him with gifts from her vakaf. She turned to Hatice. She told her sister to cleanse her estates of the market officer's allies. She said she would send 2 women from her own staff to oversee the purge. Hatice accepted. Her voice was thin. She kept her eyes on the floor. Family and office do not blend. Hafsa faced Hürrem next. She commended the kitchen woman who had seen the scribe. She ordered a steady pension for that witness. She then set a rule. All palace charity, all purchases, all lists would pass through the Valide's registrar. Hürrem agreed. She asked to visit the mosque school that week. Hafsa approved and named the hour. Boundaries stood clear. 2 patrons now share one map. By noon, the janissaries read the posted notice. A scribe punished. A market officer removed. The scales under audit. No princess named. No steward shamed in public. The barracks calmed. The markets steadied. The fortress kept the pantry clerk in a small cell. The judge began the accounts. Ibrahim moved through stalls with a slate and 3 clerks. Calm as a result, not a mood. Weeks passed. The audit cut out a line of bribe takers at the scales and in the kitchens. The pantry clerk lost his post. The Boston Sabasha kept his seal under double key. Hatice appointed a new steward approved by the Valide. Hürrem grew in favor. She built charities under Hafsa's registrar. She learned the corridors and the pauses between doors. She learned when to wait and when to ask. Patience can outlast rank. Years passed. Hafsa's power hardened into office. She set the pattern for the Valide Sultan. She commanded access. She placed women and men. She funded schools, baths, and mosques. She used vakaf income to act without draining the treasury. She moved the harem like a guard line and a council. She spoke for the dynasty when the Sultan wished quiet hands. A template now exists. Hafsa died in Suleiman's reign. The title did not die. Other mothers rose and used the same tools with greater reach. Nurbanu shaped Murad's court and foreign letters. Safia steered appointments and envoy audiences. Kosem acted as regent when sons were young. Turhan rebuilt the navy and ruled the household until her son stood firm. The city later called this span the rule of royal women. The Valide Sultan anchored it. Regency will come. Back to the chamber. The lamps hiss. The ledger pages lie flat. The eunuchs guard the doors. The gardens sleep. The seal boxes sit under two keys. The rules hold because one woman defended them day by day, not with drama in the square, with orders in small rooms, with signatures and witnesses, with food delivered on time and markets kept clean, with a coach that left for the mosque when the city needed to see calm. Stability starts in rooms without windows. In the end, the household learned her shape. The Grand Vizier learned to pause before he sent a list. The Aegis learned to ask for wording. The princesses learned that charity and seals flowed through one hand. The consorts learned the lanes that kept peace. The empire learned the title that named that hand. The office outlived the person, and you stand again in Topkapi, 1520. The lamps smoke. The keys clink. The corridor presses your shoulder as guards pass. You see the coach wait for the Valide. You hear her order and the city exhale. You feel the cool stone under your palm as the door closes. Would you step through when she calls? Or wait and watch the power move past you? Power in this court begins at the mother's door. If you want the next chapter, Nurbanu, Safiye, and Kosem, stay with us and ask for part 1 of the sequel.